happy, what is today? Thursday? Happy Thursday. Working on my Hexcrawloween entry, still as yet unnamed. We got to create some encounters. Well, I got to create a wandering creature list for the low plains. I'm just backing up to find where my BX books are at. Where did you go, BX? Oh, I think, hold on a minute. Yes, you were hidden. Okay. Because we copied what you're seeing on the screen for wandering creatures. I actually just copy pasted from another one. Because earlier on in my prep cycle, I didn't yet have any creatures in mind. But keeping in mind also that this is fairly, maybe the most inhabited area, certainly the most settled, no longer wild, subjugated, I'm not sure however you want to put it, landscape, that this is going to be more about folk than critters, I think. We can say we've got creatures, or we've got wilderness here, so we probably want to, I probably can use for some fill, maybe a couple of the critters that are around here. Probably, if we look at, well, what have we got? If we look at the western or eastern, probably more likely not the, well, they're on the same river as the western side. So, well, I guess we'll definitely have the giant hawks. The giant hawks makes sense. I don't think the were rats and the were boars are not, they're not at a point where they're going to want to muck around with people. They got other things going on. They are not likely to be going. I also had determined that the spiders, we got some pretty, I don't know how deadly are they, but we have some nasty spiders here, but you can't see it, but there's actually, these are all sort of forested slopes and smaller mounts and hills and rises. And they're on, I've just kind of thought of, they're on the far side of these mounts. So you kind of go over some, there's maybe a ridge line or whatnot. And this ridge line prevents, it's kind of a natural barrier so that the kind of evil, nasty camel spiders aren't getting over. Brian, hey Brian, asks if anybody's got tips for segmenting a 4-ish hour one-shot. Going to be heavily inspired by Innsmouth, but need to dose out combat carefully so it doesn't take out the whole session. Well, I guess, Brian, what system are you playing in? Because if you're playing as something like BX or OD&D, the combats can go pretty darn quickly, and I would not necessarily worry about it. Also, I think for myself, and I can only speak for myself, I really appreciate the games in which the combats, not that they're not there, there's certainly opportunity for them, but that they're not necessary, right? It's not, we do something and then have an obligatory combat, do something else, have an obligatory combat, do something else, have an obligatory combat like that. Where the combats are there and we can kind of choose a little bit. Obviously, for a con game especially, I think having somewhat of a prescribed path is fine and normal. I mean, I've played in some great games that didn't have that, which is kind of opened my eyes to, oh my gosh, you can really, and I've mentioned this before, some of the games I played in, not at this past ShireCon, but at the couple of ShireCons previously, I played in some really good games that were kind of wide open and had a good job of course, who you have at your table, blah, 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 but having it really be open-ended, what kind of approach you take. That being said, what system are you using? If you're using 5e where you think a combat's going to take you 45 minutes, and Brian just said, yeah, it's going to be 5e, and probably mid-level. My dudes like to build and flex their special moves in combat a lot, but it's always a slog. Yeah, I hear you. I mean, you probably want to figure out. Again, it's going to be very table dependent. That's one of the nice things I think in the OSR. It's kind of, it's kind of an interesting point of difference. I mean, people love to say OSR's like this and 5e's like this and that kind of thing, but this is maybe going to be slightly different. I don't know. I'm about to explain that in OSR, you talk about things a lot. You're making, because especially at low levels, right? Things can get very, very dicey. So you talk about doing stuff a lot, but the actual doing of things, particularly combat, doesn't take very long. You'll spend a lot of time talking about what approach you take, whatever you do, and then when you finally get down, like, all right, we're doing it, the actual doing is quickly. I feel, and I don't know if that's true that people do as much talking about stuff in something like 5e because you tend to be much more survivable, so that you don't necessarily have to worry about, hey, oh my gosh, we're gonna die. We're gonna die. We could really die if this goes wrong. But then the doing of the thing can end up taking a lot longer just because there's just more variables at play and more abilities, and that the some of the bloat of resources that comes with the survivability could just mean that people have more toys to play with, so they tend to throw them out longer, all that kind of stuff, right? Blah blah blah. Hey Terrence, hey Magnus. Ryan says their group talks a bunch and then takes a long time in combat too. Yeah, so I always think that's what's fun in combat that maybe doesn't get explored enough is having a bunch of low-level dudes that kind of what were they called? Fourth edition had that term for them. Were they minions? I think not to be confused, not to be confused with the movie, the Despicable Me little critters, but I think they were called minions. They just had the thing is with minions, and it wasn't quite as simple. When people often talk about minions now, I think they actually oversimplify just a bit of what a minion was. A minion went down and had 1 hit point. However, you had to hit it directly. You could not, because a lot of 4th edition had a lot of things that would do damage to this and then splash damage, lesser splash damage to something else. It had to be directly targeted. Now, something like a fireball that directly targets a whole area, that would wipe out tons of minions if it hit. But if you had something like, aha, I hit with my great sword and I can do a little cleaving extra damage to the guy standing next to him, that wouldn't actually kill a minion. And then the other thing is minions could scale in level. They weren't just a level 0 nobody. You could have essentially high HD, high CR minions. They could have armor and everything just like another, you could have, I don't know, some kind of maybe you upscale some bugbears and they're a CR whatever, and they've got really good armor class and really good armor and armor class and armor, yes, both of them, yes they do the same armor class and armor, really good weapons, whatever. You could basically count out your minions in a similar way. It's just at the end of the day they have 1 hit point, and that might be something you could use in a combat where you could throw a bunch of stuff, but it can resolve pretty quickly. At least you can have, I mean, I wouldn't want to, I mean, I don't know. It might be interesting to say, hey, everyone's a minion, and just say, hey, they all got 1 hit point, but you're going to have to hit them and do something to them and just throw oodles and oodles of people at them. And this is just cold water for the working man. But what you can do is use them to fill out the enemy force so that they do present a challenge that can scale. So your mid-level guys who are fighting kind of mid-level monsters, you can have mid-level minions. You can have a bunch of them, which means that it lets your different characters with area effect powers and things like that, if they can, 4th edition had a bunch of this stuff, area effects or area effects in general, damaging area spells, things that made difficult terrain, things that made other, things that, I don't know, put different status effects on it and all that kind of stuff. And everybody can kind of have fun playing with them, but yet the minions, when it comes down to it, are going to get off the board pretty darn quickly. And then you can have, and obviously you can have leaders and other types mixed in with them that are more fleshed out, literally, with more hit points and things like that. And given how long 5e combat, I'm kind of surprised, A, that they didn't include them to begin with, and then B, that more people haven't adapted them. Of course, there is that little bit where it feels kind of video gamey, because you got 2 hobgoblins, one of them's got a blue sash and one of them's got a red sash, and they're otherwise fairly identical, but the red sash guy goes down with a single slice and the blue sash guy takes 8 hits. So I always thought it'd maybe differentiate them a little bit more to show that they're kind of different classes of creature, which on the one hand, yes, it tips the party off that potentially they're weaker, so they might be minions if your players know that minions exist, but I think that's okay. That's kind of how it should be, right? You see the waves of whatever guys coming along that are just the mooks. There's and then behind them you have the guys who are clearly a tougher, a bigger, a better brand of enemy. Magnus says, I missed a couple entries here. Where are we at? Well, I was before Brian asked this question, I was going to fill out the wandering creature list for what I'm calling the low plains, which is this area here, 003.000 and 004.000, because I hadn't named it before and I hadn't come up with anything before. And I was thinking that I want to, since I have these surrounding wilderness areas that have creatures, we already sort of have their roster set, that I could pull in for their creatures, but only maybe a couple, and the rest are going to be people. You know, the settlement folks here. So maybe the giant hawks, or I could even do this actually to make it easy, or to just roll on the western wandering creature lists. There you go. Actually, that's really easy. And I'll have the eastern over here. So we got that does mean I could potentially get some of the spiders coming, but that's okay. You know, now that I'm thinking about it, that's all right. They can incur. And then I can get rid of all these. I mean, I could make a rule for the crab spiders too if I wanted to, which maybe I still might. That's something that I like that, shoot, what's it called? Wolves Upon the Coast had, where they would have a note saying, hey, these guys would only appear if you're within a certain distance. So I could do that if I wanted to say the fact that they're crab spiders. But I might, that can be a nice rumor or something interesting, another thing to pull folks in here. Maybe there's a prospector or somebody looking for minerals up in here that's encountered the spiders, made contact in a bad way. So actually, that's not bad. And then, do I have a name for this guy yet? I don't think I came up with a name. No, I don't. I need a name. What's a name? What's in a name? Okay. Let's see. I gotta update this page because it's got really old videos down here. But I made this page to basically create giveaway to get hirelings. I'm just looking for a name, but I like to use it. I'll use it. I'll pull it up for names, just for anything. Randifor, it's not bad. Arnbjorg, Vidwin. Let's recruit another 50. Oh, that guy's Girththun. I should have collapsed those multiple THs. Brandhelm. Oh, I like that. I'll go with Lord Brandhelm. Yep. There we go. Okay. So we can say, let's see. Retinue. Lord Brandhelm. Maybe I could, I don't know. We'll see if I want to actually. I'll just put retinue. So let's make it simpler. Lord Brandhelm's retinue. I'll probably come up with a Warden. 3 and 4 are farmers from the village. I'll have the name. And then what other, I mean, I know there's going to be, how specific should I get? How specific? Maybe I'll just put villagers, and I'll have a, do something like that. How do I delete the table again? That wasn't that. No. In the village. Oops, I saw it and I messed it up. No, don't do that. It was delete. There we go. Okay. See the village below. All right. We'll we shall 0, 0. Did I put the village? Wandering villagers. I'll actually put another one here. Wandering retinue. And I can fill those out. Okay. I'll figure out what these mean down the line. It doesn't really matter right now. I mean, everything matters, but it's not maybe first on my list. First on my to-dos. Okay, so let's see. Where are we at? So we got the wandering creatures, which is what I was most. See. I don't need to copy. See, Lord Brand Helm's Castle. Okay. All right. Wandering villagers, errands. I got to figure out. Do I want to figure out? Oh, so this is what I was going to do. So this actually has come up in a couple of the videos I've done lately. I don't know if the new approach that I've been doing to streams and whatnot is working, or it's just that I kind of enough. It wasn't really a. Well, it wasn't. Obviously, this is not something I really set out to do as in terms of like a new methodology. But I did that video about me watching Ginny D's thing because it came up on my feed, and that did really well, relatively speaking, for videos. A lot of people seem to like it. And then from there, somebody suggested I watch a Bob World Builder video, which I then did a video about that, and that one's done even better. Eat Master wants to know if this is Miro I'm using. No, it's something called Ouija, WEJE.io. But it's Miro like. And that one did really well. Has done, even better. And it's a couple things. I guess I should not be surprised that I think the concept of creator on creator violence as a potential as a thing is it's clicks, like the Schadenfreude, I think, with WotC and things. I think the idea that I or somebody else might be looking to take down another creator, even though that's not at all what I was trying to do. And I got a couple of comments of people who are like, yeah, take that, Bob World Builder. That's not my intention. I'm not trying to, I don't think, if you watch that video and came away with it like, yeah, I'm not trying to take folks down, right? I watched the video. I thought it was a decent video. There were some things that I thought, oh, well, that's kind of interesting. I have a different take on it. And I tried to then take that and spin it into something I think positive, or at least hopefully useful and constructive, and not just like, yeah, they're wrong. And of course, I actually liked the Ginny D video, and I don't think she really did anything wrong, which is kind of interesting about that. But I you know, in a comment to that video, I got a suggestion to go watch somebody else's video, a Dungeon Masterpiece video. So I might do that one too. But part of that one, which I thought was interesting, is I liked some of what he's doing with the tables, though I find that, and obviously this is not, it's a whole different ballgame if you're creating a product, something that you're, or just something that you're going to hand off to somebody else, as opposed to something for yourself. And the thing is, I keep seeing is folks kind of treating at these tables at some point like they're locked in amber. Like, okay, now you don't ever touch it again. And you go through these machinations so that you never have to edit the table. Don't edit the table. You know, do this or that so you don't have to edit the table. But especially because I watched the Dungeon Masterpiece one already, he's using a D6 table. It's a tiny table. I mean, I like the D6, and I'm not besmirching the use of a D6 table. Look at these tables are all D6. My point is that these are small tables. And if you use the table for a week, a month, and then you got to change an entry, or it makes sense to swap out an entry, just go ahead and swap out the entry. I don't know, is paper super precious, especially digitally? Are you running out of room in the Excel or the Google Sheet? Are you on your last sheet page and you got no more room? I mean, just make a new table, you know, archive that table, and hey, we've passed a new thing, and now we can have a slightly different table. You know, it's okay. It's okay. The other thing it got me thinking about, and I don't know if different people do this approaches. I would say for myself, and I'm going to get into it in terms of what I'm doing here in a minute, is the idea of having sort of prep tables versus gaming tables. Hold on, I need a drink here. I need a drink. What do I mean? Maybe you can already suss out what I mean, but I'm going to explain what I mean. What I mean is this. If you watch, like I like to, and I've said this before, I've enjoyed watching Tested, when, especially really the building stuff. When Adam Savage is making stuff in his cave, I would love to be more about that. Maybe I'll get to learn how to do some kind of handsy stuff. My creative stuff is here, and the stuff you're looking at. But what you find, and I'm sure if you've done work like that, built stuff like he does, you make tools. Oftentimes you make tools and aids that help you in the process of making your final thing, but they don't necessarily show up in that final thing, if that makes sense. So you're doing something, and okay, you need a shim for something, or you need a support, or you need something, a template, something. And these are things that in the final product, if you were to take it apart, you'd never find. The shim wouldn't show up, the template wouldn't show up, the support, whatever it is, they don't show up. You wouldn't look at it. If someone were to examine it later, they would never see that thing. But you needed that thing to make the product. The great part with the stuff, I think, with the kind of prep we're doing in this kind of sandbox prep, these kind of things, is that unlike, you know, in a project, often you make at least from what I see, you might make a template, you might make a shim, a support, something like that. And it's very specific to that particular project. So unless you're going to do it over and over again, that shim is kind of, you know, it's done. It's over. Well, it fit that purpose to do that particular thing. And now, unless you can reshape it into something else, it's gone. It's over. Same thing with the template. Well, I got this template, but I'm never going to I don't anticipate making this thing again. So the template's kind of a one project, one use. And those are the prep tools. The shim is a prep tool. The support's a prep tool. The template is a prep tool. And then you have the stuff you get at the table, which is what you use those prep tools to make, you then deploy at the table. And I think when you look at a final project, something you might be buying, you're seeing the game tables. You're not seeing the prep stuff. That stuff doesn't make it into the final product. The shims, the supports, the templates that made the random tables or whatever it is in the final product that you receive, you open up the PDF or you flip through the book, you know, you see the table of whatever. You don't see all that prep stuff, but they're probably there. The author, the creator probably used some kind of shims and supports and templates, but they just don't make it, right? And I think that sometimes with this discourse, I think on Wandering Creatures, I think that doesn't really get mentioned much, because you can make for yourself shim supports templates for your wandering creatures that you don't have to throw away, that you could use over and over and over and over again. And then you don't necessarily deploy those at the table, though you probably could if you wanted to. What you do is you use those to create kind of the final table that ends up showing up like you might see for your particular stretch of woods or for a particular dungeon. You say, oh yeah, there's this final table. But and then when when you need to make another table, you have all these tools to make it very easy to go through and make another table, so that that final table, for as long as it lasts, great. And I'm not saying you should make tables, for everything, but at the same time, you don't need to hold on to that one table like it's the only table you're ever going to have. Edit the thing, create a new one, take out an entry, add an entry. It's all right. You can make a copy. You don't have to burn the old one. Get another piece of paper, put it, or file, or even, heck, just put it below the other one, right? It's okay, we can use more than one. And therefore, your tables can evolve with play. They're not stuck. But one of the things that Dungeon Masterpiece had, and I like the way he went about it, was, having, like some kind of motivation or sort of activity. Maybe, motivation or activity. And a complication, I think. I don't always think you need to have all that stuff. I think, again, I think sometimes we can overcomplicate things. Look, some wolves in the woods doesn't have to have a complication. They could just be some wolves in the woods, but they might have a complication, and that complication can make it interesting. That complication can really give it a unique flavor. Magnus says they wish Dungeon Masterpiece uploaded more. His videos are great. Well, yeah, I think that's the first one I watched, and yeah, it was good. I liked what he did. I think, like I said, I think the only thing I might disagree with him is again, he not goes through a lot of hoops, but he makes this concerted effort to kind of give, to say, hey, keep using this table. It's like, man, it's a six entry table. We can, it can be temporal. It doesn't have to be for all time. But I thought his techniques were good. So he talks about, so what he does in his video is he has, you come up with the monsters. So let's say what I have here, and then you would come up with, I guess he would have I call it I put motivation. Really, it's activity. And his is interesting. What I liked about it was he said, okay, what is a hunter doing? They're hunting. So he'd write that activity in. What does a lizard do? Maybe it's sunbathing. It's lying in the sun, or something else. It's hiding in a hole. What do you have? And then what you do is you take those 6, but then you randomize them. So you would roll from column 1 and you roll from column 2, and so you wouldn't get a straight line. So you might have, if you had, maybe this would make sense if I put them next to each other. Let me do that real quick. Let me do that. Hold on a minute. Let me just. All right. So let's do this. All right. So I'll just use one of these ones. So we got a giant lizard. We've got crab spiders, camel spiders, giant hawk, and I'm just gonna leave it right. Giant hawk and were-rats. All right. Okay. So you'd have that. Then you would have this activity, and we would say, okay, well, what do giant lizards do? We could say hiding in a hole. What are crab spiders doing? They are, stalking prey. What are camel spiders doing? They are, let's just call it scrabbling across the ground. What are giant hawks doing? Circling prey. We have another giant hawk, so what else might a giant hawk be doing? Feeding on a kill. What are the were-rats doing? Skulking besides a trail. Frederick says, this time of year, throw a scarecrow and a headless horseman. Yeah, I'm not really going. I don't know what the the jam doesn't require a Halloween theme. I'll probably do something with maybe make some kind of spiritual stuff. I don't think, you know, it's funny. I'm not too far from Headless Horseman, from where that took place up in the Hudson Valley, but I don't think I'm going to. I don't think I'm going to do that. Could be a scarecrow. I could maybe because I could maybe have a scarecrow on the farm. Something terrible happened, and then I think the third one they had. Oh, the complication, right? And then you'd have something, you know, I don't know, wounded, lost, desperate, confused. What other complication could they have? I have lost already. Attacked. Escaping. Hey, Neon Glitch. Okay, so the dungeon masterpiece concept is you take these creatures, you match up activities with you match up an activity for each creature on the list. You come up with some complications. I don't even know if these are really good complications, but I'm coming up with them in the moment. Right? And then, but you don't roll them when you roll your dice. You wouldn't roll one die and take giant lizard hiding in a hole that's wounded. You would roll those. You would roll your dice. Let me just take 3d6 here. I do not. Frederick asks if I live close enough to hear the hooves at night. No, not that close. Not that close. So I'd roll these dice, and I get 5, 3, and 4, which means I get a giant hawk that's scrabbling across the ground and is confused. Right? And so that's a really interesting encounter. Now, I think his idea conceptually, and yes, Neon Glitch, this I am literally relaying what was in that Dungeon Masterpiece video that somebody recommended I watch. I think his point would be that you would roll these. This would be your this is, you know, I would cut this out and I would put this in here instead and do it, which I like, which is not a bad thing. And I think if you have time to do that, that's great. I think where I think what I see other folks doing is go with something a little bit more generic, and then this would be my prep table. So we were talking before, right? Prep tables. These are the supports, the shims, whatever. They don't necessarily show up in the final table like you might see if you were to download this at the end of the month or something, or at the beginning of the next month. And then that's the final, the gaming table. It shows up at the table. I gotta come out. It shows up in your game at your session. I usually call it the session table versus the prep table. I would say use something like this as your prep table, and then you create something here that becomes kind of your at the game table. And then once you've gone through some of these, it's very easy to just refire and reload. And kind of going back to, or as I attempt to close the circle with what I was saying, when you watch, an Adam Savage or someone's video where they're making stuff and they have to make a shim or a template or a support for something, and then they have to, at the end of the project, they basically toss it away because it's over. You don't have to toss these things away. You make yourself a list of complications, and you can keep growing these. You could start off with 6, then you get some inspiration, add another few on there. You can end up with as many as you want. You don't have to start. I think a problem, not a problem, but a barrier, I think, to people is that they might see a video or they see a product that says a D100 something or other, and they're like, oh my gosh, I could never make a D100 table. Like, well, you don't have to. Or you could do it over time. Start with just 4 or 6, and then you can add 2 to get to a D8, and then 2 more to get to a D10, and then 2 more to get to a D12, and then maybe you just kind of slowly work on it till you get to a D20, or you can just sit with the ones you have. Just do it. And the thing is, too, is in the moment in your game, as Neon Glitch may be saying, you got to roll a whole bunch of dice. You got to figure out all the context for all these kind of at once. Whereas if you have a chance to think about the context, you're not railroading people in encounters because you still have 6 or whatever, but you get to be a little bit more thoughtful potentially with them if you want to be. it's to me, it's a fine line. I like to have a little bit of specificity. I like to be able to get that context, but I don't like it to be too specific because I find then that if I have especially with this, if I have a table of 6 encounters and they're all super specific, then what happens when I roll the same one twice? I can't use it. Or I got to start really thinking about, well, how is this one different than the last time they saw it? And then it's kind of not help it. Then I find that it's almost a hindrance to me. Or is I'm like, okay, so in this document, I will probably put these tables in the back saying, hey, if you need to build more encounters, here are some ways to do encounters. But, like we can take these activities and probably just make them a little bit less specific, hiding, stalking a target, right? I don't know. Moving, that could become moving. So we could think of another one. Skulking and hiding are kind of the same, right? So we could kind of, we can come up with, okay, what are they doing? Hiding, stalking a target. If you wanted to be, moving, I don't know, haphazardly with that, I don't know, or just moving. Frederick says, because years ago they ran a reverse campaign. Players played the dungeon monsters. They like to have a rumor table of what the monsters learn about the players. This can lead to some fun taunting later. Yeah, I like those things, Frederick, to a point. So the idea is that the monsters can learn stuff about the players. The problem I have with those kinds of concepts is sometimes is how the monster. So if it's just a taunting, it's just kind of a fun thing. That maybe is okay. But as a player, something I really get irritated about is if I've done a good job covering my tracks, eliminating witnesses, making sure that nobody's escaping, but suddenly the monsters in the next area know what I've been up to. I'm like, how did they know? To me, it gets a little bit in that, like, okay. It's kind of like that when the GM says, haha, well, you guys have been using lots of magic missiles, so now my guys are going to have magic missile defense belts. And it's like, well, I wouldn't mind that, but who escaped to tell them we were using magic missile? Because as far as I know, nobody's been escaping these combats. Every time we use magic missile, we've killed everybody. So where's the chain of information between monster A getting downed with magic missile and then monster B showing up taunting us for using magic missile? So I would just want to be careful with that a little bit, because that's the kind of thing I think at least maybe I'm sensitive to when I play. I don't want if you're gonna have that happen, then to me I make sure that somebody escapes, and I've done that before. I've had that there, like that trope of the dark figure, the silhouette on the hill, who's watching the battle, who gallops off after the first round or two. To do something like that, to be there where it's like, okay, the monsters are smart and they're watching to see how the players respond, and now they've gotten a look at, okay, this is kind of how the players operate. Now they run off so that they can actually have an excuse to have learned something, and not that somehow magically they know. It used to drive me nuts, and kind of like in those sort of big open world games like Oblivion or Skyrim or something like that, where you go into a town or a village or a gang and you just beat the pus out of them. You kill everybody, right? You literally kill everybody. And then your reputation's gone down, and like 3 villages over, that's over a hill and across a river and through a dark forest. And it's like, how did they know what I did over in that other village where I slaughtered everybody in a single night and there was no survivors? Like, how did they suddenly know that I'm a bad guy? I'm all for accountability, but to me, you need to be able to, I want anyway, to be able to be traceable, or give yourself some room to, and I don't mind it over time, right? Because sure, I'm sure that, I was on the road, witnesses could place me on the road going into that village, and then the next day someone comes to make a milk delivery in the village, and the village is decimated, it's totally destroyed, worse than decimated, I guess, it's totally obliterated. And, oh my gosh, and of course, I can see over time how word filters back and wanted posters with my guy's face on them show up. But it shouldn't be right afterwards somewhere that is disconnected and has no connection and no time is really taking place, right? I want there to be, you know, kind of I want there to be due process, if you will. Whatever that means to you. Neon Glitch says they tried to talk the sly flourish method of making new notes each session, so I tried never sit down to a session with the same tables. But I see how cumbersome that can be on a larger scale. Yes, and I think there's probably and what I would say is I think there's a good midpoint. There's a good, you don't have to go that far, especially if nothing really happens. But you can also, like, you can use the best of both worlds, right? So your party encounters something, because remember, they might not encounter anything, so you might not have any of these encounters go off because they just might not roll whatever the wandering creature roll is and how they deal with them. And you're probably in a session, so, you know, looking up here, whatever the party's doing, I don't know, depending on what their thing is. Let's say if starting off, they start off in this castle and they decide they want to go over here, and we get one wandering encounter here on the road, you know, or they don't. If it's depending on the encounter, if it's a giant lizard hiding, I can reuse that encounter. There's more than one. You know, you it's like saying there's deer feeding on grass in a little clearing. It's like, well, you know, I don't usually tend to have that as an encounter. I feel like I want to save encounters for things that are more, I don't know, a kind of not eye catching, but just more interesting than just that. To me is just kind of dressing. Or if you're doing a hunt, then maybe it's meaningful. But outside of, like, we're actually going to literally do a hunting activity, I'm fine to just have that be kind of in the background, right? But okay, deer on the grass. All right, you know, and next time you come by, yeah, you see some more deer eating grass. That's fine. If you have something that's, you know, crab spiders and camel spiders locked in some kind of death fight, if it happens again, that would be a little bit, I mean, it could conceivably happen again, but at the same time, I go, oh, I probably want to pull that off the list and do something else, right? Instead. But you're not going to do that a bunch. It's not going to happen a bunch of times. So if you're a good improv person, then having these things separate and just rolling them all as they come up, it works fine. I mean, and I've done fine, you know, like for me personally, I can just do with having the creature, and I'll usually will be able to think something up of like, well, what is the giant lizard doing? Oh, okay, this is going on. All right, that makes sense, and I can run with it. Some people will be like, oh, I like this, and I like to have this thing going on. And then some people are like, well, you know, give me the third thing, right? And I'll be able to whip it together because I'm good at that. And then other folks want something more defined, right? And you could find wherever that is for you, your balance for a GM. You know, you can find that point and sit and like, that's what I need. I need the creature, I need activity, the complication. I want to write those out ahead of time, or I need nothing, you know, and I can do it, or I need something. I want something really specific, so I can just read it out there. A giant lizard sitting on a particular boulder, looking up at the sun, making a noise, and it's exhausted, and this or that. Like, okay, great. I literally have the entire thing written out. I'm not sure. There's no right way. Some people like things than others. I think if I was going to do that, I'd want bigger tables so that I'd have less chance of having to write them over again. But if I'm doing kind of generic things, then maybe not. And maybe with something like this where I'm just doing D6s, yeah, because I think about if I roll these and I get 5, 6, 1. Oh, I don't have 6. Let's just call that in conflict with another creature. So we'll roll that. So we got giant hawk that's in conflict with another creature. That creature's a giant lizard, and the hawk is wounded. Great. Bam. You know, that's pretty self-explanatory. Other ones, and kind of what Dungeon Masterpiece, which I liked about it, was you can get some interesting cross things. Well, if I have a human thing here who's stalking a target, you know, or his was, I think he had a trapper who was setting a trap. But now it's like, well, I got the giant hawk who's setting a trap. Like, ooh, what does that mean? You just need more time to, you need more time to process it. So you want to find the balance of what processing you want or need. Frederick says likes hags and nightmares. They're fun. Yeah, I think I mean all those things are great. I like creatures that give opportunities, not just. I mean, I think that's like all wandering creatures or all the random encounter. To me, this is another thing I was thinking about. Somebody put a comment in the Ginny D video saying that the problem with wandering creatures in a 5e context is because the basically the resource drain is ineffective. You know, in an old school game, since there's such a scarcity of resources, things that drain your resources, that's a real challenge. How to deal with something without spending the least amount of resources. I mean, that's really the game kind of in general. How do you deal with things spending the least amount of these precious resources as possible? And wandering creatures are another lever that gets pulled. That's like, well, you're going to have to think creatively or potentially lose more resources that you can't afford to lose. In a 5e context, the resource part is largely moot because people aren't generally tracking rations, light, that kind of food, all that stuff. And then even as far as abilities go, especially if you're out in the wilderness, you rest overnight, you get everything back. So, you're probably going to only fight that one thing in a day. So you can just kind of go Nova and it doesn't really, what good is it? But the part that gets missed in that is that random encounters they're an invitation. They're an invitation to interact with the world. And I think it's an invitation both for players and for the GM. As a GM, it is an invitation for you to interact in the world in the way that you didn't think about, which is what I like about them. Kind of the thing I like most about them is that they give you this big boost to all of a sudden think about your world in a different way. Well, wait a minute. Why is a giant hawk, I don't know, setting a trap for a giant lizard? Like, what is that? Like, what does that mean? Why are they doing that? And then think about, well, how does that fit? And I find that's where your kind of you get inspiration from, and that boosts your creativity. You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, what is that? Where does that come from? But it can even be other things. You can have plot hooks show up in wandering encounters. You can have information be exchanged, twists to whatever story is going on. Things happening with the BBEG or whoever your antagonists are can surface in these random encounters. There are all kinds of these interactions that you can at least invite your party to have, your players to take part in. Maybe they choose not to, and that should be and is totally fine, but they can. And so hags and other creatures that have this, I think they have this built-in concept with the hag of that bargaining, right? Where, they're a hag, a witch, somebody, usually they've got maybe things to buy and sell, information, potions, spells, charms. So they're the kind of creature that I think a lot of players may look at and not just go, well, unsheathing the greatsword, but might actually come out and want to do commerce with, which automatically gives it a little bit different flavor, a little bit broadens the spectrum of possibilities than maybe you say a goblin, and a lot of folks just going to go goblins. I take out my bow, kind of thing. Not everybody, and certainly something again I appreciate about kind of the OSR type things, that you'll get more players will be more apt to find out what the goblins are doing or what they're on about before they just go to work on them, potentially, maybe even leave them alone. And also when the OSR is in the wilderness, you could be running into 80 or 100 goblins, which means that you might not be in a position to just go to work. You might be looking and going, I hope these goblins don't decide to go to work on us, kind of thing. So I do like things like that. Frederick says also in 5e, Frederick says monsters that can cover lots of ground can be a major threat in a hex. Also in 5e, you would have to constantly rearrange the list to keep the scaling to par. I mean, yes, if you're going with the 5e, the concepts of balance that tend to be all around 5e, then yes, you would need to scale things up. If I was running a 5e game, I would probably tell my players that's not something I'm going to be dealing with. I'm going to try to pick things that are appropriate for what you're doing and what's being done, and then deal with it in kind of the old school ways, which is engage, not engage, talk, run, some combination of both, fight, whatever. But yeah, you would have to, that is definitely a potential factor you need to, something you need to factor in, a situation you need to work with. Neon Glitch says, I think that's because most modern DMs just throw them down as combat encounters. Oh, here's a giant hawk, roll initiative instead of using it instead of scene and seeing how the PCs react. Yes, that is definitely something, right? Hey, we got a random encounter, roll initiative. Yeah, like kind of Final Fantasy. I always think of Final Fantasy VII because that was the first Japanese RPG that I played, but there are no wandering creatures in there. Aren't combats, right? You're walking across some landscape. Suddenly it starts to swirl. The battle music starts up, and you're in. You're in it, and you're in combat with something. And then really it's kind of a, in that case, in that kind of game, it really is just a resource attrition. You don't care what spells you cast. You can go Nova, you can get all these things. You just want to make sure you don't use up healing potions, Phoenix Downs, the things that you don't just regen. And of course you're hoping if you win that you maybe get some, obviously, experience, and then maybe you get some items or things back. Frederick says, I should search YouTube for wandering Irish and wild Irish ponies take over town. I could definitely, that definitely seems like a fun adventure. So what I was saying here was maybe trying to come up with a list of activities that are a little bit more generic, because I want to use them for everything in here, is kind of where I was getting at. What I was talking about before I got carried away talking about something else. I really like the idea of trying to come up with using a verb that is very suggestive without having to say a lot. So you could say stalking, hiding. Racing is good because it gives a sense of speed. I think that the giant hawks flying, racing, I think that works. I want to say that circling prey is still kind of stalking. Feeding is good. In conflict with another creature. Circling is part of hunting. Yeah, I guess. I don't have hunting. Well, I have stalking, which I think would read to me as hunting, but for the were-rats, it might read me as a little more. So we got hiding, stalking, racing, I suppose resting. And then in conflict, almost parenthetically with another creature. We roll again. I think those work. And then for complications, wounded, lost, desperate, confused. Well, attacked would be kind of in conflict. So what are some other states? I only need escaping. That's kind of another kind of go word, because the racing could be escaping. Lost, desperate, wounded. I'll use hurt. Hurt, lost, desperate, confused. What are some other complications? What are some other complications? Hurt, lost, desperate, confused. Let's see. I don't know. Holding another creature. So in this case, they're, I don't know, should that be an activity? Hiding, I think it depends. I'll leave it here. I need one more. Hurt, lost, desperate, confused. These are all kind of emotional states, but then this is also, I would call it a complication, but they're not. Maybe I just say, I spelled possession. I don't know if that, I don't want to get stuck on, yeah, they all got one word. I don't really care too much about that. They're hiding, but they're hurt. They're stalking, but they're lost. Racing, but they're desperate. They're resting, but they're confused. They're feeding, and they got something else there. They're in conflict with. What is one of the things? They're hurt. Stuck. I kind of have that in Lost. Maybe they're. I'll put trapped. There we go. That works. Infected. That is definitely. I think I'd want to be. I don't know. I don't know if I want to add. That might be something in a particular area. I could definitely see in the swamp area me wanting to have an infection type thing. I think I'll defending. That would be an activity. Hiding, stalking, racing, resting, feeding, in conflict with. Yeah, because these are all. I have specific layers for the crab spiders, the camel spiders, and the giant hawks have specific layers. Actually, so does the were-rat. I think even all these have specific layers, so they don't need to be defending their nest because they are specific areas. The giant hawk's nest is over here. The crab spiders are from here. Camel spiders are from here. The were-rats are from here. Maybe the giant lizards. I don't think I've given the giant lizards a home, but I got 2 more hexes with potentials for the giant lizards. So I don't think I need anybody defending their nests. Those are specific, but I like these. I like these. So we can, if I were to, where were we? If I wanted to roll some specific ones up. Well, we got the giant lizard, so I'm not going to roll. I'll just roll the 2. Let's just say we got 1 and 3. Hiding in a hole. Desperately hiding in a hole. All right. Now for the crab spiders, and I don't know if I'll ultimately will keep these, but we'll see what we get. 3. Racing. We got racing and trapped. That's the crab spider. How would we, I'm just going to put those together. We'll have to figure out how that works. Because I could see that they're in something that they can't escape. And they're trapped, but they're running around. Camel spiders, we're getting 3 and 1. Racing and hurt. So I'll definitely swap out racing for other verbs there, but just kind of running, fleeing. That can all mention a giant hawk. 6 and 1. Hurt in conflict with. 2 giant hawks. Two giant hawks. Let's see. Each other. Above. 1 is hurt. And then the second battle of giant hawks, we get 4 and 6. Resting and trapped. Maybe someone's trapped it. And then finally for the were-rats, 4 and 2. Resting and lost. All right, so what I'm going to do is, so I don't forget, I'm going to make an appendix kind of area. Counter. And we'll throw in, let's see, I need something like that. And I'll use 1d6. 1, 2, 3. Oops. I'm just going to throw these in here. I will probably update them. 6. Ooh. I can shrink that down. I wish there was an easier way to. You sort of have to eyeball it. It doesn't really balance. I want that one to be thin. I want these to be the same size. I'm sure there's a way there's a way to figure out what the size of these things are. I mean, this is not going to be the final form of this. I mean, but it might be for an initial release because time being what it is. We say resting. Feeding. Holding. Other creature, and then in conflict. Might change another. Fighting. Oops, another conflict with another. And then we have trapped. There we go. So if, that way I'll remember to. Yep. I'll remember to have that in there. Neon Glitch asks, on an average Hexcrawl session, how many encounters do you usually go through? It's really hard to say. This is kind of the key thing, I think, with Hexcrawling that can make it difficult for folks to wrap their brains around and figure out, is that you really can't. It's very hard to say. It's very hard to say, this is how long my hex crawling portion is going to take. I think one of the mistakes people do is they'll say, I'm going to be hex crawling for 3 sessions, so we're going to do this. We're going to do it this way. Because what ends up happening too is you end up in a rote pattern because you need to fill time. Well, if I need to fill out this whole section with hex crawling, then I need to have X amount of encounters that are going to happen. Like you start to plot it like a dungeon, and in partly ways that's totally fine. You should, because there's stuff in the hex crawl like rooms that has things in it. That's fine, but a lot of the hex crawl is more like the hallways where you're moving through, and what you're doing in those hallways is very dependent on what's going on with the party at a given time. And of course, you're rolling randomly, so you could roll unluckily or you could roll luckily. If you're in forest, let's say, and you're playing something like BX where it's, I think, a 1 and 2. Hold on a minute. Is it a 1 and 2 or is it a 1 and 6? Sorry, not 1 and 2. I meant 1 or 2, 2 and 6 chance of encounters, or is it 3 is it 1 and 6 chance? I'm trying to remember. I'm turned away because I'm literally paging through the book here. By the book, it is, let's see, becoming lost. No, yeah, 2 and 6 chance. So you have a 33% chance in the woods of getting an encounter playing it by the book. So depending on what the actions the party's doing, what they're looking for, how fast they find it, what are they doing, right? And what you're rolling, there's no way of knowing. And then once you even get into an encounter, it could just be, well, we see them at range. Because the other thing to remember with wandering creature encounters or encounters in the wilderness in general is how far are they away? Same thing like it's in a dungeon. They could be 100 feet away, or in the wilderness, usually it's in yards. But I think a lot of people will use feet, but I actually think yards is better because it's giving you the option of seeing things at a longer distance. Well, how far away is it? Well, it's you're 100 yards away. You see them out there, which gives you a lot of chance to maneuver and essentially run away if you want to, or try to evade. And there are rules for evading also. If the other party decides to, the other, whatever the creatures you encounter decide to give chase, that is. But it could just be as simple as, nope, we nope out of there and we're done. So you can't, so all that stuff means you could end up with one encounter. And the other thing is, of course, you engage with an encounter and it's another party of adventurers, and the party decides to bargain with them and do whatever. I've had all kinds of fun stuff happen with these encounters where that encounter ends up taking up the rest of the session. And I love that stuff. And then other times, the party will see some other corner of their eye that I think is super interesting, and I'm hoping that they decide to check out, and they just go, nope, we got other places to be, so we're gonna scooch on by, and we'll make a note, and maybe we'll come here if we're ever in this part of town again. We'll come back. Otherwise, we are gone. So I don't know if there's a number, because you're how many times are you gonna roll? That's even very variable depending on the system you're playing. I usually would do one day, one night, per hex kind of thing to see what's there, but I will usually extend the distances, so you might just be seeing the trace of something moving through as opposed to the thing itself. So I don't know. So I think the thing is, I think I tried it. What my suggestion is my suggestion is to create your tools for your hex crawl, your tables, your stuff you're going to use. The good thing is once you've created those for a hex crawl, and you can do it over time, you don't need to, you can scale it up as you're going, is that you have them, and then when your party is out in the wilderness crawling around, because you've prepped the stuff, you can roll with that. You can use that prep you've already done, the tools you've already created to generate content and things that are happening around the party. And you can use it so that over time, what you end up doing is you don't have to spend, at the beginning, you might spend a lot of time on the hex crawling parts, getting your tables, what creatures live here, who all this stuff going on, right? Then you've got those. For example, I have in what I have here, I have all the creatures that are wandering around the spot. I got them all down. And now I have these activities I can use. I've got these complications I can use. Anytime the party's just wandering anywhere in this map, I got them covered. I don't need to prep those things anymore. Now, if they start searching, I'll come up with some rules for, maybe they find a cave, or they find some, or maybe they find nothing at all. Whatever, I can do that. But, I've got that covered. So now, if they're starting off in this village, I got to worry probably about, all right, it's theoretically possible they could get to this castle and then this ruin and maybe this castle and whatever. I don't know if they could probably find these things or even get wind of them. So now I just worry about prepping these locations. So now that I've got my wandering stuff, so for week 1, maybe I prep these 2 spots, thinking that's where they're probably going to get to. Maybe they could wander all the way to the caves. Probably not. You don't even know the cave exists yet, whatever, who knows, but probably, and this is where I'd also would say for the players, where are they going? And that's another thing. Like, ask your players where they're going. Where do you want to go to? Oh, we want to go. We've heard that on the very western edge of this area is a cave filled with were-rats. Great, then I know to prep this. We've heard that there's the ruin of a wizard tower you want to check out. Great, I want to prep that, right? But so week 1, maybe I prep this tower, and I've got the castle. I think is mostly going to be a social place and not an adventuring location. But maybe I want to have a map for it. Maybe I don't. And then prep this. And then week 2, week 3, I've got this thing prepped. Maybe they're still wandering around this, depending on how things have gone in the tower, they could still be there. So now I just prep the cave, or I prep that cave, or where do I think they're going to go next? And I can keep doing that progressively, knowing that if they're just wandering around the countryside, I got that prepped. So I think that's kind of, to me, I feel like that's the best way to look at it. And then I don't have to worry about really how many of those encounters I'm getting through, because I can just make more, and I got them set up. You could even take these encounters like we've got here and just roll them through in order. First encounter is this one. Second, you can look at it and say, well, I got 6. So I got 6 encounters worth. If I'm rolling once per day, once per night, so that would be theoretically, 2 times in a hex, but that's rolling to see if they get an encounter, which is only a 33% chance. So 1 in every 3 rolls, let's say, is going to be a hit. I got to roll, 18 times to get through my initial table. And that's a lot, especially because that area is only for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 6 hexes. So basically I got 3 of these, 3 per hex, just about. Right? 3, 6, 9, 15, 18, or I guess a little bit less, 2 and something. So that's kind of how I would look at it. You know, hope for the best, plan for the worst, kind of thing. So just, I think, and I think that as you're building out your hex crawl, just, and I think, you know, that's why I guess why I look at it and say you don't need a big table. That's 6 encounters. If I run through all of them, probably would take me a few sessions, and then I can just keep making more. And you know, and then even if every session I got to roll two of these off, that's fine. I could come up with 12 creatures. I could come up with a whole bunch more creatures that are just waiting in the wings. And then as I cross these off, okay, the were-rats are gone, something else moves in. And that thing is, and I can pull it out of the table. So you got options. You got a lot of options. I would just say, you know, once you've kind of set that foundation of prep, you can reuse it. Like I was saying, that kind of prep tables, you can reuse your prep tables over and over and over and over and over again, and they will continue to serve you well. Sorry I couldn't give you a more concrete answer to that question, but there kind of isn't one, I don't think. Maybe as you're playing, you get a feel for it, but when you're rolling with dice, who knows what you're going to get? You're going to get lucky, going to get unlucky. It's all good, right? Anyway, with that out of the way, I got a jet, folks. I get to go be a player tonight. I get to go. Tonight is my game night, so I'm looking forward to that. I got some stuff to do before then. If you're watching it now, have a great rest of your day. If you're watching or listening to this later, then have a great rest of whenever that happens to be. Game on, everybody. And I'll